The stagecoach door swung open, and Hannah Whitaker's future died before she could even step down onto Colorado soil. The man she'd traveled 800 miles to marry, a stranger whose letters promised safety and a fresh start, was already in the ground. No husband, no home, no money to go back east. Just a dusty frontier town full of hard men and harder winters, where a woman alone didn't last long. She had two choices: beg her way onto the next stage out, or accept help from a rancher whose quiet eyes held secrets she couldn't read. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Hannah's story travels. The wheel hit another rut, and Hannah's head cracked against the stagecoach wall for the 100th time. She didn't bother opening her eyes anymore, just pressed her palm against the worn wood and counted the impacts, the way she'd counted everything else in her life. Stitches and embroidery, steps to the market, days until she could leave Boston, and the suffocating weight of her sister's charity. 27 days on this godforsaken journey. 27 days of dust in her teeth, strangers' elbows in her ribs, and the constant rattle of wheels over ground that seemed determined to shake her apart. The letter was folded in her pocket, creased soft as cloth from reading. Thomas Mercer, Silver Ridge, Colorado. A good man seeking a practical woman for marriage. No romance, just honest work and mutual respect. Honest work. Mutual respect. It wasn't love, but love had never done much for Hannah anyway. Her parents were long dead, her brother-in-law made it clear she was a burden, and at 26 she'd watched every friend from childhood marry and move on while she darned their husband's socks for pennies. Thomas Mercer's letter offered something better than love. It offered purpose. "Silver Ridge," the driver shouted. 10 minutes! Hannah opened her eyes. The woman across from her, a miner's wife returning home, was already gathering her bags. She'd stopped trying to make conversation with Hannah 3 days ago, after Hannah made it clear she wasn't interested in small talk about the weather or speculation about what kind of man takes a mail-order bride. The stagecoach lurched to a stop. Hannah waited for the others to disembark first: the miner's wife, 2 cowboys who smelled like they'd been sleeping in horse stalls, and a drummer with a sample case full of patent medicines. Then she smoothed her skirt, adjusted her bonnet, and stepped down into Silver Ridge, Colorado. The first thing that hit her was the wind. Not a gentle breeze, but a hard, gritty blast that filled her mouth with dust and sent her skirt whipping against her legs. She coughed, eyes watering, and got her first real look at the place that was supposed to be her new home. Calling it a town was generous. A rutted main street ran between 2 rows of buildings that looked like they'd been hammered together by men in a hurry to get drunk. A saloon, a general store, a hotel with a balcony that sagged like a broken promise. Mountains rose in the distance, beautiful and completely indifferent to the struggling settlement at their feet. Hannah scanned the small crowd gathered near the stage office. A few rough-looking men waiting for cargo. A woman in a faded calico dress herding 2 small children away from the street. No one who looked like they were waiting for a bride. She approached the station agent, a thin man with spectacles and ink-stained fingers. "Excuse me, I'm looking for Thomas Mercer. I'm Hannah Whitaker. He should be expecting me." The man's face changed. Not much, just a slight tightening around the eyes, but Hannah had spent enough years reading her sister's moods to recognize bad news coming. "Miss Whitaker," he set down his manifest. "When did you send your last letter to Mr. Mercer?" 3 weeks ago, from Kansas City. I told him I'd arrived today." Her chest felt tight. "Is something wrong?" The agent glanced past her shoulder, then back. "Maybe you should step into my office." "I'd rather you just tell me." He took off his spectacles, polished them on his vest, put them back on. Stalling. "There was an incident 4 days ago. A dispute over water rights. It got heated. Thomas Mercer was shot. He died the next morning." The words came at her like stones. Shot. Died. She heard them clearly, but they didn't make sense. Not arranged in that order, not about a man whose letters talked about spring planting and whether she knew how to preserve vegetables. "There must be a mistake," she said, though she knew there wasn't. "No mistake, miss. I'm real sorry. Preacher did a service Sunday. Some of the other ranchers are trying to sort out what happens to his land claim." Hannah's bag slipped from her fingers and hit the ground. She looked down at it. Everything she owned packed into one carpet bag and a small trunk that was still being unloaded from the stage. Her whole life. And it didn't even fill 2 pieces of luggage. Miss Whitaker, you all right? Was she all right? She'd just traveled 800 miles to marry a dead man. She had $43 in her purse, no family to return to, and winter was coming to a frontier town where she didn't know a single soul. I need... She stopped. Needed what? A time machine? A different life? I need to sit down. The agent gestured to a chair inside the tiny office. Hannah sank into it, her legs suddenly unreliable. Through the window, she could see people going about their business. The world kept moving, even though hers had just stopped. Do you have family back east? The agent asked. Someone who could send you money for the return fare? Hannah almost laughed. Her sister would send money, all right, and a letter dripping with "I told you so." This is what comes from making rash decisions, Hannah. From thinking you're too good for the opportunities right here at home. From always wanting something different. Then she'd have to live in that house again, watching her sister's pitying looks and her brother-in-law's irritation at having another mouth to feed. No, she said. No family. The agent shifted uncomfortably. There's a boarding house. Mrs. Chen runs it, but I should tell you, Silver Ridge isn't easy on women alone. Might be better to take work in Denver, or I don't have enough money for Denver. Silence, the kind that made her skin crawl. A shadow filled the doorway. Hannah looked up to see a man standing there, hat in his hands. Tall, broad-shouldered, probably in his mid-30s, dark hair, darker eyes, and a face that looked like it didn't waste effort on unnecessary expressions. Pardon the interruption, he said. His voice was quiet, almost gentle, which seemed at odds with his size. I heard Miss Whitaker arrived. Cole. The agent sounded relieved. This is Hannah Whitaker. Miss Whitaker, this is Cole Dawson. He runs a ranch about 6 miles north. Cole nodded to her but didn't smile. I knew Thomas. Not well, but enough to drink coffee with when we both came to town. I'm sorry for what happened. Hannah nodded back, not trusting her voice. I also heard you might be in a difficult position, Cole continued, and I wanted to make an offer, if you're willing to hear it. The agent's chair creaked as he leaned back, suddenly very interested in organizing his paperwork. Hannah stood up. What kind of offer? I need a housekeeper, Cole said. My ranch is small, but it keeps me busy. Too busy to keep up with cooking and cleaning and all the things that need doing. I can offer wages, room and board, separate quarters in the house, respect and safety guaranteed. It was the kind of offer that could mean 100 different things, and Hannah knew it. She studied his face, looking for the tells she'd learned from years of reading men who smiled too much or stood too close. But Cole Dawson just stood there, steady as stone, waiting for her answer. Why would you help me? She asked. You don't know me. No, ma'am. But I knew what Thomas was looking for when he sent for you. Someone practical, hardworking, honest. Figure those qualities don't change just because circumstances did. He paused. And I expect you're smart enough to know the difference between a job offer and something else. She is, Hannah said. But that doesn't mean the difference will stay clear once we're 6 miles from town with no witnesses. For the first time, something that might have been respect flickered across Cole's face. Fair point. I can take you to Mrs. Chen's boarding house tonight. You can ask around about me. There's folks in town who'll tell you if I'm decent or not. Then you can decide. The agent cleared his throat. Cole Dawson's had that ranch for 8 years. Never heard a bad word about him. Keeps to himself mostly, but he's fair in his dealings. It wasn't much of a recommendation, but it was something. And Hannah's options were narrowing by the minute. She could feel the weight of her situation pressing down like the sky before a storm. I'd like to see the boarding house, she said. Cole put his hat back on. I'll get your trunk. What? Mrs. Chen's boarding house was cleaner than Hannah expected, which wasn't saying much. The front room smelled like cabbage and tobacco smoke. The stairs creaked loud enough to wake the dead. But the room Mrs. Chen showed her was small and private, with a window that looked out on the mountains and a lock on the door. $2 a week, Mrs. Chen said. She was a tiny woman with gray-streaked hair and eyes that didn't miss anything. That includes breakfast and supper. You want lunch? That's extra. Hannah did the math in her head. At that rate, she'd be broke in 5 weeks. I'll take it for tonight, she said. I need to think about what comes next. Mrs. Chen nodded. The rancher who brought you? Dawson. He's waiting downstairs, said he'd buy you dinner if you're hungry. Hannah was starving, But she was also exhausted and overwhelmed and not sure she could sit across from a stranger and make polite conversation. Then her stomach growled loud enough to echo in the small room. "Tell him I'll be down in 10 minutes," she said. She used the wash basin to scrub the worst of the travel grime off her face and hands, then changed into a clean shirtwaist. Her reflection in the small mirror looked pale and tired, dark circles under hazel eyes, blonde hair escaping from pins that had given up somewhere in Kansas. She looked like what she was, a woman at the end of her rope. Cole was sitting at a corner table in the boarding house dining room when she came down. He stood when he saw her, an old-fashioned gesture that surprised her. "Thank you for waiting," Hannah said. "Thank you for joining me." He gestured to the chair across from him. "I took the liberty of ordering the stew. It's the only thing Mrs. Chen makes that won't fight back." Hannah sat. "You eat here often?" "When I'm in town, which isn't often." Mrs. Chen appeared with 2 bowls of something brown and steaming, plus a basket of bread that looked only slightly stale. Hannah's first spoonful was better than expected, heavy on potatoes and light on mystery meat, but hot and filling. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Hannah appreciated that he didn't try to fill the quiet with empty chatter. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "Yes, ma'am." "Why did you really come to meet the stage? You said you barely knew Thomas Mercer." Cole set down his spoon and met her eyes directly. "Because I knew what it felt like to arrive somewhere with plans that didn't work out. Seemed wrong to leave you to figure it out alone." "That's all?" "Mostly all." He paused. "I also genuinely do need help at the ranch. I'm not lying about that. But you managed before without it." "I managed poorly." A ghost of a smile. "The difference between managing and managing well is about 6 months of my life expectancy." Despite everything, Hannah almost smiled back. There was something refreshing about his bluntness. "What would the job actually involve?" she asked. "Cooking, cleaning, laundry, mending, general household management. I've got 2 hands who come by during the day. They'd need feeding too. The work's hard, but it's honest. I'd pay you $15 a month plus room and board." $15? It wasn't much, but it was more than she could make in Boston doing piecework. And it came with food and shelter. "Separate quarters, you said?" "There's 2 bedrooms upstairs in the main house. You'd have one? I'd keep the other. Door locks from the inside." He hesitated. "I know how this looks, Miss Whitaker. Woman alone, isolated ranch, man she doesn't know. I can't prove I'm trustworthy in advance. You just have to take the risk and find out. But I give you my word that you'd be safe." Hannah studied him. He looked back without flinching, without the practiced charm men usually used when they wanted something. Just quiet certainty. "I need to think about it," she said. "Of course. Take tonight. I'll come by tomorrow morning. If you want to see the ranch before deciding, I'll drive you out there. No obligation." They finished the meal talking about small things, the weather, the state of the roads, how long winter lasted this far into the mountains. Safe topics. Hannah was good at safe topics. When Cole stood to leave, he pulled out a worn leather wallet and set some coins on the table. Then he added a few more. "For your room tonight," he said when Hannah started to protest, "consider it advance payment if you take the job. And if you don't, consider it payment for putting up with the worst stagecoach ride west of the Mississippi." Before she could argue, he was gone. Done. Hannah didn't sleep well. The bed was lumpy, the walls were thin, and somewhere down the hall someone was snoring loud enough to rattle the windows. But mostly she lay awake because her mind wouldn't stop running through her options. Option 1. Use her remaining money to go back to Boston. Admit defeat. Live under her sister's roof in judgment for the rest of her life. Option 2. Try to find work in Silver Ridge. But the agent had been clear. This wasn't a town kind to women alone. And her skills were limited to things that didn't pay well even in cities where work was plentiful. Option 3. Take Cole Dawson's offer. Risk everything on the word of a stranger. When dawn finally crept through the window, she still hadn't decided. She dressed carefully, putting on her most practical dress and pinning her hair into tight submission. If she was going to see this ranch, she wanted to look like someone who could handle whatever it threw at her. Cole arrived exactly when he said he would. The wagon he drove was old but well-maintained, and the 2 horses pulling it looked healthy and calm. He helped her up to the seat without comment on her obvious exhaustion. The road north was barely a road, more like a suggestion of where previous wagons had gone. Hannah gripped the seat as they bounced over rocks and through dry creek beds. The town fell away behind them quickly, swallowed by the vast emptiness of the landscape. "It's different than Boston," Cole said. It wasn't quite a question. "Everything's different than Boston." Hannah looked out at the rolling plains giving way to rough foothills. "Is it always this empty?" "Mostly. Nearest neighbor is about 4 miles east, town 6 miles south. In winter, you might not see another soul for weeks." He said it matter-of-factly, but Hannah heard the warning underneath. This was isolation like she'd never known. No corner markets, no neighbors dropping by, no escape if things went wrong. "Does that bother you?" she asked. "The isolation?" Cole thought about it. "Sometimes, but it also means nobody bothering me with opinions about how I should run my life." Hannah understood that feeling perfectly. The ranch appeared gradually, first a windmill in the distance, then a barn that had seen better days, finally a house that was bigger than she'd expected, but rougher too. Wood siding weathered to gray, a porch that sagged slightly on one end, windows that needed new frames. But the land around it was beautiful in a harsh way. Mountains rising blue-purple in the distance. Grass that would be green in spring but was golden-brown now as autumn settled in. A sense of space so enormous it made her chest tight. Cole stopped the wagon near the house. "Want to see inside?" The house was worse than the outside suggested. The front room had furniture, a table, chairs, a worn sofa near a stone fireplace, but everything was covered in a layer of dust thick enough to write in. The kitchen had a good stove, but dirty dishes were piled everywhere. Upstairs, the bedrooms were barely bedrooms. One had a bed frame with no mattress. The other had a mattress on the floor, and clothes scattered like someone had exploded a trunk. "I told you I needed help," Cole said. He sounded almost apologetic. Hannah walked through the rooms again, this time really looking. The bones of the house were solid, good windows, even if they were dirty. A root cellar that stayed cool. A stove that would heat the whole downstairs if managed right. It just needed someone who gave a damn. "Who lived here before you?" she asked. "Family called the Harrisons. They gave up after 2 hard winters and went back to Kansas. I bought the land from them cheap." He leaned against the door frame. "I've been focused on building up the herd, fixing the barn, getting the well reliable. The house kept getting pushed to later." Hannah ran her finger along a windowsill and came away with enough dust to plant crops in. "If I took this job, I'd have full authority over the household? Cleaning, organizing, ordering supplies?" "Yes, ma'am." "And the hands you mentioned?" "Sam and Carlos. They come most days, work cattle and mending fence and whatever else needs doing. Good men, both of them. They usually bring their own lunch, but they'd appreciate a hot meal if you felt like cooking." Hannah looked out the kitchen window at the barn and the mountains beyond. It was so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat. "I need to be clear about something," she said without turning around. "I came here to marry Thomas Mercer because I needed security. Not love, not romance, security. If I take this job, it's for the same reason. I'll work hard and I'll be honest, but I'm not looking for anything beyond employment." "Understood." "And if at any point I feel unsafe, I'll leave, even if it means walking back to town in the dark." "Fair enough." Cole moved to where she could see him. "And if at any point you're unhappy with the arrangement, I'll drive you to town myself and pay you for however many weeks you worked." Hannah turned to face him. "Why are you being so reasonable about this?" He smiled, just barely. "Because I've learned that people who feel trapped do poor work and cause problems. Better to make things clear from the start." She took a breath. This was insane. She was about to move to an isolated ranch with a man she'd known for less than 24 hours based on nothing but instinct and desperation. But then, she'd already traveled 800 miles to marry a stranger. At least this stranger was still alive. "I'll take the job," she said. "On a trial basis. 1 month. If either of us wants out after that, we can reassess." Cole extended his hand. 1 month trial, fair wages, honest work, mutual respect. Hannah shook it. His grip was firm but not crushing, his hand calloused from years of hard labor. "When do you want me to start?" she asked. "Today's Friday. How about Monday? Gives you the weekend to settle anything you need in town." "Monday," Hannah agreed. As they drove back to Silver Ridge, Hannah watched the ranch disappear behind them. She'd just made another leap into the unknown, betting her safety on a stranger's word. But this time felt different than boarding that stagecoach in Boston. This time, she was choosing for herself. And maybe that made all the difference. Hannah spent Saturday buying supplies. The general store owner, a round man named Garrett, gave her curious looks as she selected practical items. Soap, flour, sugar, a new set of kitchen towels, fabric for curtains. "Heard you're working for Cole Dawson," he said, while tallying her purchases. Word traveled fast in small towns. "Yes, starting Monday. He's a good man. Quiet, keeps his word, pays his bills on time." Garrett wrapped her items in brown paper. "His ranch isn't much to look at yet, but he's building something solid. Give it time." Sunday. Hannah stayed in her room at the boarding house and mended the clothes she'd been living in for a month. Her hands moved automatically, stitching tiers, replacing buttons, letting hems down where wear had made them ragged. Practical work that kept her mind from spinning too far into worry. Mrs. Chen knocked around noon with a plate of food. "You leaving tomorrow?" "Yes, thank you for the room." The older woman studied her with sharp eyes. "Cole Dawson came by earlier. Left this." She handed Hannah a sealed envelope. Inside was $30 and a note in careful handwriting. "First month's wages in advance, in case you need anything before Monday." CD. Hannah stared at the money. It was either an act of extraordinary trust or a trap so sophisticated she couldn't see it yet. She folded the bills carefully and put them in her purse, then used $2 to pay Mrs. Chen for the weekend. "You're brave," Mrs. Chen said. "Or crazy. Haven't decided which." "Can it be both?" The old woman almost smiled. "Usually is." Monday morning arrived gray and cold. Hannah packed her carpet bag, checked the room one last time for anything forgotten, and went downstairs. Cole was waiting with the wagon, same as before. The ride to the ranch was quieter this time. Hannah was too nervous for small talk, and Cole seemed to sense it. When they arrived, he helped her down and carried her trunk upstairs to the bedroom he'd designated as hers. It was cleaner than it had been Friday. He'd swept the floors, washed the window, and put a mattress on the bed frame. Small gestures, but they meant something. "I'll let you settle in," he said from the doorway. "Come down when you're ready. No rush." Hannah waited until his footsteps faded down the stairs, then sat on the bed. The mattress was thin but adequate. The room was plain but hers. Through the window she could see for miles, nothing but land and sky and the kind of silence she'd never experienced in the city. She unpacked slowly, putting her few dresses in the narrow wardrobe, her brushes and pins on the small dresser. When everything was in its place, she stood in the center of the room and took inventory. A dead fiancé, an uncertain job, a stranger downstairs who held her immediate future in his hands, but also a locked door, wages of her own, a choice she'd made for herself. It would have to be enough. Hannah smoothed her skirt, checked her hair in the small mirror, and went downstairs to start her new life. The kitchen was exactly as disastrous as she remembered. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, then rolled up her sleeves. "All right," she said to the empty room. "Let's see what we're working with." The first thing Hannah learned was that dirt had layers. Not metaphorical layers, actual physical stratification that revealed how long a place had been neglected. The kitchen table had a top layer of dust, a middle layer of dried food spills, and a bottom layer of grime so old it had fossilized into the wood grain. She attacked it with hot water and lye soap, scrubbing until her knuckles were raw and the table's original color emerged, a warm pine that had probably looked nice once. By noon, she'd filled 2 buckets with filthy water and discovered the table had 4 matching chairs, though one was missing a spindle and another wobbled dangerously. Cole came in around 1 o'clock, stopping short when he saw the transformation. "I can see the floor," he said. "Barely," Hannah wrung out her rag into the bucket. "When's the last time you swept in here?" "Honestly, I'm not sure I ever have." He looked almost embarrassed. "I've been eating mostly in town or making do with bread and jerky." "That explains the lack of dishes. I found 3 plates and 1 fork. The rest are probably in the barn. I kept taking them out there and forgetting to bring them back." He cleared his throat. "I was going to check the fence line by the north pasture. Should take most of the afternoon. There's bread and cheese in the cold box if you get hungry." Hannah nodded, already turning back to her work. She heard him leave, heard the barn door creak open and closed. Then silence except for the wind and the sound of her own breathing. By evening, the kitchen was habitable. The floor was swept, the dishes washed and organized, the counter cleared of mysterious stains she didn't want to investigate too closely. Her back ached and her hands were chapped, but when she looked around, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Useful. Cole returned as the sun was setting, smelling like horse and leather. He stopped in the kitchen doorway again, taking in the change. "I didn't expect this much in one day," he said. "I had time and motivation." Hannah was stirring a pot of beans she'd found in the pantry and set to soaking. "This won't be fancy, but it'll be hot." They ate at the newly clean table, bowls of beans and the last of the bread. Cole ate like a man who'd forgotten what a real meal tasted like, cleaning his bowl twice. "Thank you," he said when he finished. "It's just beans. It's the first hot meal I've had at home in 6 months." Hannah collected the bowls and set them in the wash basin. "Tomorrow I'll start on the rest of the house. It's going to take a while." "Take whatever time you need. I'm not going anywhere." That night, lying in her narrow bed with the door locked, Hannah listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch. Wind against the house, some animal calling in the distance, Cole's footsteps in the room below hers, then silence as he settled for the night. She'd done it. Made it through day 1. Only 29 more to go before she could reassess. The next morning she was up before dawn. She'd always been an early riser, but here there was no city noise to compete with, just birds and wind and the gradual lightening of the sky. She dressed quickly in the cold room and went downstairs to find Cole already in the kitchen, building up the fire in the stove. "Morning," he said. "Coffee's almost ready." They fell into a routine without discussing it. Hannah would cook breakfast, eggs when the chickens cooperated, cornmeal mush when they didn't, while Cole handled the outside chores. They'd eat together, mostly in silence, then go their separate ways until evening. Hannah worked methodically through the house. The front room took 2 full days, washing windows, beating rugs, scrubbing the fireplace until her arms shook. She found things that told her about the previous occupants: a child's wooden horse under the sofa, a woman's hair comb behind the stove, names carved into the windowsill. "The Harrisons had a daughter," she said to Cole one evening. He looked up from the harness he was mending. 2 daughters. Little ones. The oldest was maybe 5 when they left. They carved their names by the kitchen window, Mary and Ruth. Cole's expression shifted, something sad passing through. "Mrs. Harrison cried for a week before they left. Mr. Harrison tried to make it work, but the land was too much for him. Wrong soil, wrong water, wrong everything. Do you think they were right to leave? I think they did what they needed to do." He went back to his mending. "Same as you coming here, same as me staying. People make choices based on what they can handle." On the 4th day, Sam and Carlos arrived. Hannah heard them before she saw them. The sound of horses, men's voices calling to each other in a mix of English and Spanish. She was elbow-deep in laundry when they appeared at the back door. Sam was young, maybe 20, with a sunburned face and nervous energy. Carlos was older, stocky, with gray in his dark hair and eyes that took in everything. Both looked surprised to see her. "Ma'am," Sam said, yanking off his hat. "We didn't know. Cole didn't mention—" "Hannah Whitaker," she said, drying her hands. "I'm the new housekeeper." "Sam Porter," he gestured to his companion. "This is Carlos Mendoza." Carlos tipped his hat. "Pleased to meet you, senora." "Are you hungry? I made extra biscuits this morning." The look that passed between them was almost comical, hope warring with disbelief. "We don't want to impose," Sam started. "It's not an imposition. Sit down before they get cold." They sat like men who'd forgotten how to be in a kitchen, perched on the edge of their chairs, while Hannah piled a plate with biscuits and bacon she'd been saving. They ate like they were worried someone might take it away, barely stopping to breathe. "This is real good, ma'am," Sam said around a mouthful. "It's biscuits, nothing fancy." "It's better than anything we've had in months," Carlos said. His English was accented but clear. "Cole, he cannot cook. We have been suffering." Cole appeared in the doorway, dust on his shoulders. "You telling tales about me, Carlos?" "Only the truth, Jefe." The easy banter between them told Hannah more than words could. These weren't just hired hands. They were friends, or close enough to it. After Sam and Carlos left, Hannah found herself wondering about their lives. Where did they go when they weren't here? Did they have families? She realized how little she knew about this place, about the people in it. "Carlos has a wife and 3 sons over in Alamosa," Cole said that evening, as if he'd read her thoughts. "He comes here during the week, goes home on weekends. Sam's saving money to start his own place eventually." "They seem like good men." "They are." I couldn't run this place without them. Hannah filed that information away. Cole Dawson was loyal to the people who worked for him, spoke of them with respect. It was another piece of the puzzle she was slowly assembling. By the end of the first week, the house looked like a different place. Not perfect. The floors were still scarred, the furniture still worn, but clean and organized. Hannah had even hung curtains she'd made from cheap fabric, simple panels that softened the harsh light and made the rooms feel less empty. Cole noticed. He didn't say much, but she'd catch him looking around with something like wonder, as if he couldn't quite believe the transformation. The second week brought colder weather. Hannah woke one morning to frost on the windows and her breath visible in the bedroom. She dressed in layers and went downstairs to find Cole already stoking the fire. "Winter's coming early," he said. "I need to get the cattle moved to lower pasture before the first real snow. Might be gone for a few days." Hannah felt an unexpected flutter of anxiety. Alone. She'd be alone here, miles from town, with no way to call for help if something went wrong. "I'll be fine," she heard herself say. "Sam will check on you, and there's a shotgun in the closet by the front door if you need it. I know how to shoot." Her brother-in-law had taught her, more as a way to show off his own skills than out of any concern for her safety, but she'd paid attention. Cole looked at her with something like approval. "Good. Hope you won't need it, but it's there." He left the next morning with Carlos, driving the cattle north, while Sam stayed behind to handle the fence repairs. Hannah threw herself into work, canning the last of the vegetables from the struggling garden, making soap, patching the holes in Cole's spare shirts. Sam came by each day around noon, ostensibly to check on repairs, but clearly under orders to make sure she was all right. He was polite but awkward, treating her like she might break if he spoke too loud. "You don't have to tiptoe around me," Hannah said on the second day. "I'm not made of glass." Sam flushed. "No, ma'am. Just don't want to be disrespectful." "You know what's disrespectful? Treating a grown woman like she can't have a normal conversation." She handed him a sandwich. "Sit. Tell me about this ranch." He sat, still nervous, but started talking. About how Cole had bought the place with money saved from years of working other people's ranches. How he'd built it up slowly, carefully, never taking on more debt than he could handle. How everyone in Silveridge thought he was crazy to try making it work on land the Harrisons had given up on. "But he's stubborn," Sam said. "Won't quit once he's set his mind to something." Hannah thought about that after Sam left. Stubborn. She understood stubborn. She'd been stubborn her whole life, insisting on learning to read when her father said it was unnecessary, refusing to marry the butcher's son her sister had picked out, boarding that stagecoach even when everyone said she was making a mistake. Maybe that's why she'd ended up here. Two stubborn people, too proud to quit even when quitting made sense. Cole came back on the fourth day, tired and covered in trail dust. Hannah had stew waiting, hot and thick with vegetables. He ate 3 bowls without speaking, then sat back with a sigh. "Cattle are settled," he said. "Should be good until spring, assuming we don't get anything too brutal." Sam said winter here can be harsh. Can be. Last year wasn't too bad. Year before that, we got snowed in for 3 weeks straight. Hannah tried to imagine 3 weeks without leaving the house, without seeing another person. "What did you do?" "Read, slept, went a little crazy." He smiled slightly. "It's easier with 2 people. You can at least argue about something besides your own thoughts." It was the first acknowledgement that her presence here was about more than just clean floors and hot meals. That maybe, just maybe, the isolation had been getting to him too. The third week, Hannah started cooking in earnest. Not just beans and biscuits, but real meals: roasted chicken, beef stew, apple pie made from dried fruit. She'd always been a decent cook, but in Boston there'd been no one to cook for, no reason to bother. Here, there was purpose in it. Cole noticed. Of course he noticed. He'd gone from near starvation to actual food. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" he asked one night over pot roast that fell apart at the touch of a fork. "My mother, before she died. Then practice and necessity." Hannah cut another bite. "My sister couldn't cook worth a damn. If I wanted to eat anything edible, I had to make it myself." Lucky for me. They talked more during meals now, small things at first: weather, work, plans for the ranch, then gradually bigger things. Cole told her about growing up on a farm in Missouri, losing his parents young, working his way west through a series of bad jobs, and worse luck until he'd saved enough to buy this land. Hannah told him about Boston, about the grinding poverty that looked respectable from the outside, about watching her friends marry for security while pretending it was love, about the suffocating weight of being dependent on family who saw you as a burden. Is that why you answered Thomas Mercer's advertisement? Cole asked. To escape? Partly. Mostly because I wanted something of my own. Even if it was just a shared life with a stranger, at least it would be mine. She paused. Does that make sense? More than you know. The fourth week brought the first snow. Not much, just a dusting that made the world look cleaner than it was. Hannah stood at the kitchen window watching it fall, mesmerized by the silence of it. Beautiful, isn't it? Cole said from behind her. And terrifying. All that space, all that quiet. You get used to it. Do you? Or do you just get numb to it? He considered that. Maybe a little of both. That night they sat in the front room after supper, Cole reading a week-old newspaper while Hannah mended socks by lamplight. It was domestic in a way that should have felt strange, but didn't. Like they were playing house, except it wasn't playing. It was just life, unfolding one quiet evening at a time. Can I ask you something? Hannah said, setting down her mending. Sure. Why didn't you ever marry? You're not old, you've got land, you're not cruel or stupid. Seems like there would have been opportunities. Cole folded the newspaper carefully. There were. A few. But the women who were interested wanted what I couldn't give them. A town life, regular social calls, safety from the gamble of ranching. And the ones who might have understood this life never crossed my path. He paused. Until now, I guess. I'm not a candidate for marriage. We're clear on that. I know. I'm just saying, you understand this life. The work, the isolation, the risk. Most people don't. Hannah picked up her mending again, unsettled by the conversation's direction. Understanding something and wanting to live it permanently are different things. True enough. But the words hung in the air between them, changing something neither of them was ready to name. The next morning, Hannah was pulling bread from the oven when she heard horses, more than just Sam and Carlos. She went to the window and saw 3 men she didn't recognize dismounting near the barn. Cole came in through the back door, his face tight. Go upstairs. What's wrong? Just go upstairs and stay there until I come get you. The tone left no room for argument. Hannah went, but she left her door cracked open so she could hear. The men's voices carried through the house. Rough voices, the kind that enjoyed their own volume. Dawson, we know you're in there. Hannah heard Cole's boots on the porch. Can I help you, gentlemen? Heard you got yourself a woman living here. That true? I've got a housekeeper, if that's your business. Might be our business. Might be she knows something about what happened to Mercer. Hannah's blood went cold. She crept closer to the stairs, trying to hear better. She arrived after Mercer died, Cole said, his voice steady and dangerous. And I don't see how his death is any of your concern, Patterson. It's our concern when someone's stirring up trouble about water rights. Mercer was, and now you are too. I'm not stirring up anything. I'm just trying to run my ranch. See that you keep it that way. A pause. And maybe think about whether having a stranger living in your house is such a smart idea. People might get the wrong impression. The only impression people should get is that it's none of their damn business. There was a tense silence. Hannah held her breath, hand on the shotgun she'd retrieved from the closet. Finally, she heard horses moving, voices fading. Cole's boots came up the stairs slowly. They're gone, he said through the door. Hannah opened it. Who were they? Patterson and his boys. They own the ranch east of here, the big one. They've been trying to buy up smaller properties, consolidate water access. He rubbed his face. Thomas Mercer refused to sell. That's what the argument was about that got him killed. And they think you're next. Maybe. Or they're just testing to see if I'll scare easy. He met her eyes. I'm sorry. I didn't think they'd come here, bring you into it. I'm already in it. I'm living here, aren't I? You could leave. I'd understand if you wanted to. Hannah thought about it. Really thought about it. The smart thing would be to pack her bag, take the wages Cole had paid her, go back to town, and find safer work. The smart thing would be to run from potential violence, for men like Patterson who thought intimidation was a valid business strategy. But running was what she'd been doing her whole life. Running from Boston, running from her sister's house, running from every situation that felt too hard or too complicated. "I'm not leaving," she said, "but I want to know everything. What happened to Thomas Mercer? What Patterson wants? What the real stakes are here? No more protecting me by keeping me in the dark." Cole looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Fair enough. Come downstairs. I'll tell you everything I know." They sat at the kitchen table and Cole laid it out. The water situation in the valley was complicated. Most ranches depended on creek access that originated in the mountains. Patterson owned the largest ranch and wanted to control the water flow, which meant buying out or driving out the smaller operators. Thomas Mercer's land had creek access Patterson needed. When Mercer refused to sell, things escalated. "No one can prove Patterson was behind the shooting," Cole said, "but everyone knows his hand was in it somehow. And your land has decent well water, but Patterson's been eyeing the northern section near the creek. He's made offers. I've refused. So now you're a target too." "Possibly. But I'm not Thomas Mercer. I'm not alone. I've got Sam and Carlos, and I know how to handle trouble when it comes." He looked at her seriously. "But you need to understand, if you stay, there's risk. Not just to me, to you. Patterson's not above using whatever leverage he can find." Hannah thought about the men on the porch, their casual threats, about being miles from help if things went bad, about the very real possibility that staying here could get her hurt or worse. Then she thought about going back to Boston, about the suffocating safety of her sister's house, about spending the rest of her life as someone's burden instead of someone's equal. "I'm staying," she said again, "but I'm keeping that shotgun loaded." Cole's expression shifted into something like respect and worry mixed together. "All right, then we do this smart. You learn the land around here, where you can go if you need to hide, where the property lines are, who the neighbors are that we can trust. And if I say run, you run. No arguments." "Agreed. And if I say something feels wrong, you listen." "Deal." They shook on it, and Hannah felt the shift between them. They weren't just employer and employee anymore. They were partners in survival, bound together by shared risk and the stubborn refusal to be pushed out of a place they'd both chosen. The weeks rolled on, autumn deepening into the threshold of winter. Hannah learned the rhythm of ranch life. Up before dawn, work until dark, sleep heavy and dreamless. Her hands grew calloused, her arms stronger. The face she saw in the mirror looked different, tanned despite the cooling weather, leaner, harder in ways that weren't just physical. Sam and Carlos became regular fixtures, arriving mid-morning and staying through supper. Hannah cooked for all of them, and the kitchen table became a place of easy conversation. Carlos told stories about his sons. Sam complained about a girl in town who wouldn't give him the time of day. Cole listened and occasionally added dry commentary that made them all laugh. It felt, Hannah realized one evening while washing dishes, like family. Not the kind she'd grown up with, tense and resentful and always keeping score, but the kind you chose. The kind that formed through shared work and mutual respect. "You're smiling," Cole said, coming in from checking the horses. Hannah hadn't realized she was. "Just thinking." "About?" "How strange it is that this feels normal now. 2 months ago I was in Boston. Now I'm washing dishes in Colorado and it feels like I've been here forever." Cole hung his coat by the door. "Is that a good thing?" "I think so. I'm not sure yet." He came to stand beside her at the sink, picking up a towel to dry. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you stayed. Even though I'm stubborn and ask too many questions, especially because of that." They worked in comfortable silence, the kind that didn't need filling. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Winter was coming, real winter, the kind that would lock them in and test whether this fragile partnership could withstand isolation. But standing there in the warm kitchen, Hannah wasn't afraid. She'd faced worse than winter. She'd faced losing everything and starting over with nothing but nerve and necessity. Whatever came next, she'd handle it. They'd handle it. Together. The first real snow came on a Tuesday in late November. Fat flakes that fell thick and fast until the world disappeared behind a white curtain. Hannah woke to silence so complete it felt physical, pressing against her ears. She dressed quickly in the frigid bedroom and hurried downstairs to find Cole already at the window, staring out at the transformed landscape. "How much?" she asked. 8 inches already. Still coming down." He turned from the window, his face serious. "This is the early one. The real storms won't hit until January, February. Hannah moved to the stove, stirring up the banked coals and adding wood. The everyday motion steadied her nerves. Sam and Carlos won't be able to make it out here. Not for a few days, no. We're on our own until this passes and the road's clear enough for travel. On our own. The words settled between them, heavy with implications neither acknowledged. They'd been dancing around something for weeks now. Glances that lasted too long, conversations that veered toward personal territory before one of them pulled back. The work arrangement had held, professional and appropriate, but underneath it something else was growing. Hannah busied herself with breakfast, frying eggs and salt pork, while Cole brought in more firewood. They ate without much conversation, the weight of the storm and their isolation making small talk feel frivolous. After breakfast, Cole bundled up to check on the horses and make sure the barn was secure. Hannah watched him from the window, a dark figure moving through the white, and felt the first real flutter of fear. Not of him, of this, of being cut off from everything, dependent entirely on each other, with no buffer and no escape. He came back an hour later, snow-crusted on his coat and hat, his face red from cold. "Everything's secure," he said, stamping his boots at the door, "but we need to be smart about supplies. This could last a week or more." They took inventory together. Enough flour and cornmeal for bread, potatoes and dried beans, salt pork and some beef jerky, coffee, thank heaven, and sugar. Canned vegetables Hannah had put up. They wouldn't starve, but meals would be basic. The first day passed slowly. Cole worked on mending harnesses and sharpening tools, while Hannah sewed and baked bread. They circled each other carefully, maintaining the polite distance that had served them well. But by evening, the silence was oppressive. "Do you play cards?" Cole asked, setting aside the harness. "Some. My father taught me poker before my sister found out and had a fit about it being unladylike." Cole smiled slightly. "Poker it is, then." They played for matchsticks at the kitchen table, the lamplight casting warm shadows while wind howled outside. Hannah won the first 3 hands, and Cole studied her with new interest. "You're counting cards," he said. "Is that against the rules?" "No, just didn't expect it. My father said if you're going to do something, do it well enough to win." Hannah dealt another hand, "Even if it's unladylike." They played until late, the conversation flowing easier than it had in weeks. Cole told her about learning to break horses, about a bad fall that left him with a scar along his ribs. Hannah told him about sneaking books from the library her sister forbade her to visit, reading by candlelight after everyone else was asleep. "What kind of books?" Cole asked. "Everything. Adventure stories, histories, anything that took me somewhere else." She laid down her cards, another winning hand. "My sister thought reading gave women ideas above their station." "What do you think?" "I think ideas are the only thing that kept me sane." Cole looked at her across the table, his expression shifting into something she couldn't quite read. "I'm glad you had them, the ideas. Otherwise, you might not have gotten on that stagecoach. And you'd still be eating jerky for dinner. Among other things," he gathered the cards, "I'm going to bed before you win all my matches." That night, Hannah lay awake listening to the storm. The house creaked and settled, wind finding every gap in the walls. She thought about Cole in the room below hers, probably awake too, both of them alone but together in this small pocket of warmth against the brutal cold. The second day brought more snow. They were running out of tasks that could be done separately, so they worked together, Hannah kneading bread while Cole repaired a broken chair, both of them in the kitchen because it was the warmest room. "Can I ask you something personal?" Hannah said, not looking up from the dough. "Depends on how personal." "Why did you really offer me this job?" "The truth, not the polite version." Cole set down his hammer. "The polite version was true. I did need help. But—" He was quiet for a long moment. "But I also knew what it felt like to show up somewhere with plans that fell apart, to have nowhere to go and no good options. When I first came west, I worked for a rancher who took a chance on me when no one else would. He didn't have to. I was green as grass and probably more trouble than I was worth, but he gave me work and taught me enough to survive." Cole picked up a nail, turned it over in his fingers. "I figured maybe it was my turn to be that person for someone else." Hannah shaped the dough into loaves, her hands working automatically. "You could have just given me money for a ticket back to Boston." "Would you have taken it?" She thought about that. "Probably not." "That's what I figured." He smiled slightly. "You had the look of someone who was done running backward. Seemed like you needed a chance to run forward instead. The bread went into the oven, and Hannah wiped flour from her hands. Something was shifting between them, the careful boundaries they'd maintained starting to blur. It should have scared her more than it did. By the third day, they'd settled into an easier rhythm. Cole read aloud from the newspaper while Hannah mended, his voice a steady rumble that filled the quiet. She found herself watching him sometimes, the way his hands moved, competent and sure, the rare smile that changed his whole face. She caught him watching her too, looking away quickly when she noticed, but not quickly enough. That evening, they were washing dishes together when Hannah's hand slipped on a wet plate. It shattered on the floor, shards scattering across the boards. "Damn," she muttered, kneeling to gather the pieces. "Careful," Cole started, but she'd already cut her finger on a sharp edge. Blood welled up, bright red. Before she could move, Cole had her hand in his, examining the cut. "It's not deep," he said, "but it needs cleaning." He led her to the table, sat her down, and fetched clean water and cloth. His hands were gentle, wrapping her finger with a care that made her throat tight. "Thank you," she said quietly. He didn't let go of her hand, just stood there, holding it, their faces closer than they'd ever been. Hannah could see flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cold kitchen. "Hannah," he said, and her name in his voice sounded different, like something precious. She should pull away, should make a joke, diffuse the tension, retreat to safe ground. Instead, she stayed perfectly still, barely breathing. "This wasn't supposed to happen," Cole said, not quite meeting her eyes. "I promised you this was just work, that you'd be safe." "I am safe. That's not what I mean." He finally looked at her directly. "I'm talking about this, about me forgetting where the lines are supposed to be." Hannah's heart was hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. "What if I'm forgetting too?" The words hung between them, dangerous and true. Cole's thumb traced a gentle circle on her wrist, right where her pulse beat visibly against the skin. "You should tell me to stop," he said. "I should do a lot of things." He leaned closer, giving her every chance to pull back. Hannah didn't move. When his lips met hers, soft and questioning, she kissed him back with weeks of accumulated want she hadn't let herself acknowledge. It was Cole who pulled away first, resting his forehead against hers. "This complicates everything," he said. "I know. You could still leave. When the snow clears. Take your wages and find something safer, simpler." Hannah pulled back enough to look at him. "Is that what you want?" "No." The word came out rough, honest. "But what I want and what's right for you might not be the same thing." "Stop deciding what's right for me. I've had enough people doing that for a lifetime." Cole's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. "All right, then you tell me. What do you want?" It was the question no one had ever asked her. Not her sister, not the men who'd tried to court her, not Thomas Mercer in his careful letters. "What do you want, Hannah?" She wanted to feel like this. Alive and terrified and standing on the edge of something that could either save her or destroy her completely. She wanted to stop playing it safe. She wanted to choose, for once, based on what her heart said, instead of what made practical sense. "I want to stay," she said. "Not as your housekeeper, not as someone you're helping out of pity. I want—" She stopped, struggling for words. "I don't know exactly what this is or where it goes, but I want to find out." Cole closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them, they were bright with something that looked like relief and fear mixed together. "I can't promise you easy, this life, this place. It's hard even without feelings complicating it. I'm not looking for easy. And I can't promise I'll be good at this. I've spent 8 years alone, and before that I wasn't much better at being with people." "Cole," Hannah put her hand over his. "I'm not asking for promises. I'm asking for a chance." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Hannah felt something inside her shift and settle like a bone going back into place. This was right. Terrifying and complicated and probably foolish, but right. When they finally pulled apart, Cole rested his hands on her shoulders. "We should probably talk about what this means, practically speaking." Hannah almost laughed. Leave it to him to try to organize feelings into something manageable. "All right, practically speaking. If you're staying, really staying, then the arrangement changes. You're not my employee anymore. You're—" He hesitated. What are you? I don't know. What do you want me to be? Cole looked at her for a long moment. My partner. In all of this. The ranch, the life, everything. Equal stakes, equal say, equal risk. That's a lot to offer someone you've known for 2 months. I know. But I also know I don't want to wake up 6 months from now and realize I let you slip away because I was too careful or too scared. Hannah thought about the stagecoach that had brought her here, about the dead man she'd come to marry, about every turn her life had taken that led to this kitchen, in this storm, with this man. All right, she said. Partners. They shook on it like a business deal, then both laughed at the absurdity of trying to formalize what they were feeling. The storm raged on outside, but inside the small house, something had fundamentally shifted. They moved around each other differently now. Cole's hand on her back as he passed, Hannah's fingers brushing his arm when she set down his coffee. Small touches that spoke of claimed territory, of barriers lowered. That night, Cole stopped at the bottom of the stairs as Hannah headed up to bed. Hannah? She turned. Yes? I meant what I said, about being partners. That includes you having your own space, your own room, for as long as you want it. He cleared his throat. I don't want you to feel pressured into anything more than you're ready for. The old Hannah, the careful one, would have thanked him and hurried upstairs to the safety of her locked door. But that Hannah had died somewhere on the road to Silver Ridge. The woman standing here now was braver, or maybe just tired of being afraid. What if I don't want my own space tonight? She asked quietly. Cole went very still. You should be sure. I am sure. She came back down 2 steps, close enough to see his expression clearly. I've spent my whole life being told what's proper, what's safe, what I should want. I'm done with should. This is what I want. He met her halfway on the stairs, and this time when he kissed her, there was no hesitation, no holding back. Hannah felt like she was falling and flying at the same time, her heart hammering as he lifted her easily and carried her the rest of the way up. His room was simple, a bed, a dresser, a chair, with his clothes draped over it. He set her down gently, then seemed to second-guess himself. We don't have to, he started. Hannah put her finger on his lips. Stop being so noble. It's very inconvenient right now. He laughed, the sound surprised and genuine, and after that there were no more words. Just hands and skin and the storm outside making the world disappear until nothing existed except the two of them in that small room, finally honest about what they wanted. Later, lying in the tangle of blankets with Cole's arm around her and her head on his chest, Hannah listened to his heartbeat slow to normal. The wind still howled, but it sounded different now, less threatening, just weather. You all right? Cole asked, his voice rough. Better than all right. She traced patterns on his chest. Are you? Terrified. Hannah propped herself up to look at him. Of what? Of this being real. Of caring about someone enough that losing them would break me. He met her eyes. I told myself I wouldn't do this. Wouldn't let anyone get that close. It's easier alone. Easier isn't always better. No. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. But safer. I'm scared too, Hannah admitted. Every time something good happens to me, it gets taken away. My parents, my home, even Thomas Mercer. I never knew him, but I'd built a whole future in my head and it died before I could even try. I can't promise nothing bad will happen, Cole said. Out here, there are no guarantees. Storm could take the cattle, drought could kill the land, Patterson could… He stopped. There's 100 ways this could fall apart. So why risk it? He pulled her closer, because for the first time in 8 years, I have something worth risking for. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, while outside the storm finally began to ease. Hannah woke alone. For a moment, panic seized her. Had she dreamed it? Had she imagined the whole thing? Then she heard sounds from downstairs, smelled coffee brewing, and relaxed. She dressed quickly and went down to find Cole at the stove, making breakfast. He turned when he heard her, and the smile that crossed his face was worth every risk she'd taken to get here. Morning, he said. Morning. She came to stand beside him, suddenly shy. Everything felt different in daylight. Cole seemed to sense it. He set down the spatula and turned to face her fully. I want to be clear about something. What happened last night, I don't take it lightly. I know we're doing this backward, making decisions in the middle of a storm, But I meant what I said. You're my partner now, in everything. What if we're both making a mistake? Then we make it together and figure out how to fix it. He took her hand. But I don't think we are. I think we're both just scared of wanting something this much. Hannah squeezed his hand. So what happens now? Now we finish the winter. See if we can stand each other when we're snowed in for weeks. He smiled. And when spring comes, we figure out how to tell Sam and Carlos that things have changed. They'll know the second they see us. Probably. Cole pulled her closer. Does that bother you? No. Hannah realized it was true. She didn't care what people thought anymore. She was done living for other people's approval. Let them talk. The snow finally stopped late that afternoon. They went outside together to survey the damage, wading through drifts that came up to Hannah's knees. The world was transformed, buried under a thick white blanket that made everything look clean and new. Cole pointed out landmarks. The barn barely visible, the fence line completely hidden, the mountains in the distance sharp against the pale sky. This is what winter looks like here, he said, beautiful and brutal at the same time. Hannah looked at the landscape, at the impossible distance between them and the nearest help, at the small house that was their only shelter against the cold. A month ago, it would have terrified her. Now it felt like possibility. How long until we can get to town? She asked. Week, maybe. Roads need to clear and freeze solid enough for the wagon. A week. 7 more days of isolation, of being alone together with nothing to distract them from what they'd started. Good, Hannah said. Cole looked at her, surprised. Good? I want time to figure this out before the rest of the world comes back. She met his eyes. Is that selfish? If it is, we're both guilty. He took her mittened hand. Come on, let's get back inside before we freeze. That week became something Hannah would remember for the rest of her life. Not because it was perfect. They argued about small things, got on each other's nerves in the way people do when they can't escape each other. But they also learned each other's rhythms, favorite things, the small habits that make up a shared life. Cole sang when he thought she couldn't hear, old songs his mother had taught him. Hannah talked to herself while she cooked, working through problems out loud. They both read before bed, sometimes sharing passages that struck them. And at night, in the darkness of Cole's room that had become their room, they learned each other in ways that had nothing to do with words. On the 7th day, they heard horses approaching, Sam and Carlos finally able to make it through. Hannah and Cole looked at each other across the kitchen. The world was coming back, and with it all the complications they'd held at bay. Ready? Cole asked. Hannah straightened her shoulders. As I'll ever be. They went out to meet the men together, not touching but standing close enough to make their partnership clear. Sam noticed immediately, his eyes going wide. Carlos just smiled. Jefe, he said to Cole, you have been busy while we were gone. Cole's hand found Hannah's, their fingers lacing together. We need to talk. All of us. They gathered in the kitchen, Sam still looking shocked, Carlos amused. Hannah poured coffee while Cole explained the storm, the isolation, the decision they'd made. So she's not the housekeeper anymore? Sam asked, struggling to catch up. I'm still keeping house, Hannah said, but I'm also a full partner in the ranch. Equal say in decisions, equal share in what we build. Sam looked between them. That's, unconventional. We're not conventional people, Cole said simply. Carlos raised his coffee cup. To unconventional people. They make life more interesting. Sam finally cracked a smile. Well, congratulations, I guess. Though you could have waited for better weather before falling in love. Love? Hannah's heart skipped. They hadn't used that word. Had carefully avoided it, in fact. Cole's hand tightened on hers. Yes, he said quietly. Love. The word settled over them like snow, soft and inexorable and changing everything it touched. After Sam and Carlos left, promising to spread the word in town in a way that minimized scandal, Hannah and Cole stood at the window watching them ride away. Did you mean it? Hannah asked. About love? Cole turned to face her. I wouldn't have said it if I didn't. We barely know each other. I know you're stubborn and smart and brave enough to build a life from nothing. I know you make me want to be better than I am. I know when I wake up, the first thing I think about is whether you're already up or if I can steal a few more minutes watching you sleep. He took her face in his hands. Maybe that's not knowing you well enough, but it feels like enough to build on. Hannah's eyes were stinging. No one had ever said things like that to her. No one had ever looked at her like she was worth keeping. I love you too, she whispered, and it scares me to death. Good. If we're going to be terrified, at least we're doing it together. He kissed her, and Hannah thought about the journey that had brought her here, the stagecoach that had carried her west to marry a dead man. The day she'd stood in the station agent's office with no future and no hope. The moment Cole had walked through that door and offered her a chance, she'd thought she was accepting a job. Turned out she was accepting everything. The town knew within 3 days. Hannah could tell from the looks she got when she rode into Silver Ridge with Cole the following week. Some curious, some disapproving, a few outright hostile. Mrs. Chen gave her a long stare when they stopped at the boarding house to settle Hannah's final bill. So you're staying with Dawson, the old woman said. It wasn't a question. I am. As what exactly? Hannah met her eyes directly. As his partner. Mrs. Chen's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her gaze. That's brave. Or stupid. Time will tell which. Probably both, Hannah said. The old woman almost smiled. At least you're honest about it. They made their rounds. The general store for supplies, the feed shop for grain, the bank where Cole had a small account. People whispered. Hannah ignored them. She'd spent too much of her life worrying about what people thought. That version of herself had died somewhere between Boston and here. At the general store, Garrett was more direct. Heard you and Dawson are making things official. We're partners, Cole said before Hannah could respond. She's got equal stake in the ranch now. Garrett's eyebrows went up. That's unusual. We're unusual people. Cole's tone didn't invite further comment. Loading supplies into the wagon, Hannah noticed a group of men standing outside the saloon, watching them. One of them was Patterson. She recognized him from his visit to the ranch. He said something to the others and they laughed, the sound carrying across the street. Cole's jaw tightened, but he kept loading without acknowledging them. Are they going to be a problem? Hannah asked quietly. Probably. He lifted a sack of flour. Patterson doesn't like being defied. Us staying together, building something, it's defiance. Good. Cole looked at her surprised. Good? I'm tired of men like him deciding what women can and can't do. If we're defying him just by existing, I'll take it. On the ride home, Cole was quiet. Hannah let him be, knowing he was working through something. Finally, as the ranch came into view, he spoke. We should get married. Hannah's heart lurched. What? Legally married. It would protect you, give you claim to the land if anything happens to me, and it would shut up people like Patterson who think they can use our arrangement against us. It was the least romantic proposal in history. Hannah should have been insulted. Instead, she was oddly touched by the pragmatism of it. Is that the only reason? She asked. Cole pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to face her. No. I want to marry you because I love you, and I want everyone to know it. But the practical reasons matter too. This life doesn't leave much room for romance. Sometimes the best way to show love is to make sure the person you love is protected. Hannah thought about Thomas Mercer's letters, full of practical arrangements and mutual respect. She'd been willing to marry him for those reasons alone. With Cole, she had those same practical benefits plus something she'd never expected to find, actual love. All right, she said, but I have conditions. Name them. We do this as equals. The ranch stays in both our names, all decisions are made together, and if I ever want to leave, I can without needing your permission or being labeled a deserter. Cole nodded slowly. Fair. And my conditions, you promise to tell me when I'm being an idiot, you keep cooking because I'll starve otherwise, and you never regret choosing this life. I can't promise the last one. None of us know what's coming. Then promise to try not to regret it. Hannah reached for his hand. I promise to try. They were married 2 weeks later by a circuit judge who passed through Silver Ridge. The ceremony took 10 minutes in the judge's hotel room, with Sam and Carlos as witnesses, and Mrs. Chen as an unexpected guest who brought a small cake she claimed was left over from another occasion. Hannah wore her best dress, which wasn't saying much. Cole wore his only suit, which had moth holes in the shoulders. They said the words that made them legally bound, And when the judge pronounced them married, Cole kissed her like he was afraid she might disappear. "Well," Sam said afterward, grinning, "that was quick." "Why drag it out?" Cole said, his arm around Hannah's waist. They celebrated at the boarding house with Mrs. Chen's cake and whiskey Carlos produced from his saddlebag. It was small and strange and nothing like the wedding Hannah had imagined as a girl. It was perfect. Riding back to the ranch as the sun set, Hannah looked at the ring on her finger, a simple gold band Cole had bought with money meant for fence repairs. It caught the last light, glinting. "No regrets yet?" Cole asked. "Not yet. Ask me again when we're snowed in and you're driving me crazy." Fair enough. The winter that followed tested them in ways neither expected. The storms came hard and frequent, isolating them for days at a time. The cattle suffered, and they lost 3 calves to the cold despite their best efforts. Money got tight, tempers got shorter. They had their first real fight in January, over something stupid. Hannah wanted to spend money on books. Cole said they needed it for spring seed. It escalated quickly, both of them saying things they didn't mean, until Hannah stormed upstairs and Cole went out to the barn in the middle of a snowstorm. He came back an hour later, half frozen, and found Hannah sitting at the kitchen table with her face in her hands. "I'm sorry," he said, snow still in his hair. "I'm sorry too." She looked up at him. "I don't know how to do this. Be married, I mean. Fight without it meaning everything's falling apart." Cole sat down across from her. "Me neither, but I know I don't want to sleep in the barn. It's cold as hell out there." Despite everything, Hannah laughed. "You're an idiot. You promised to tell me when I was. So this is you keeping your promise." They made up, bought the seed, and the books both, and learned that fighting didn't mean ending. It was a revelation for Hannah, who'd grown up watching her sister weaponize every disagreement. With Cole, they could fight and forgive and wake up the next morning still choosing each other. February brought a warm spell, false spring that melted snow and made them hopeful before another storm buried everything again. But it also brought something else, a letter forwarded from Boston. Hannah's hand shook as she opened it, recognizing her sister's handwriting. "What is it?" Cole asked, seeing her face. "My sister, she's—" Hannah scanned the page, disbelief rising. "She's asking for money. Her husband lost his job. They're desperate." The letter was full of barely concealed panic. The sister who'd made Hannah feel like a burden now needed help herself. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of how she'd treated Hannah. Just need. "What do you want to do?" Cole asked. Hannah read the letter again. A year ago, she would have felt obligated to help despite everything. Now she felt something else. Pity, maybe, but also freedom. Her sister's crisis wasn't her responsibility anymore. "Nothing," she said finally. "I want to do nothing." "You sure?" She made it clear I wasn't family when it suited her. I don't owe her anything just because circumstances changed. Hannah folded the letter carefully. "Does that make me heartless?" "Makes you practical and honest." Cole took her hand. "You can help if you want. I won't stop you, but you don't have to." Hannah threw the letter in the fire and watched it burn. It felt like closing a door she'd been holding open for too long. Spring came slowly, grudgingly, the land emerging from snow like something being born. Hannah threw herself into work with renewed energy, planning the kitchen garden, helping with the calving, learning to ride well enough to actually be useful checking fence lines. She wasn't good at it. She fell off her horse twice, got kicked by a cow, and developed blisters that made her hands useless for a week. But she kept trying, kept learning, and Cole never made her feel inadequate for not knowing things he'd learned as a child. "You're tougher than you look," he said one evening, watching her wrap her raw hands. "I'm not tough, I'm stubborn. There's a difference." "Is there?" Hannah thought about it. Tough people don't feel the pain, stubborn people feel it and keep going anyway. "Then I'm glad you're stubborn." By late April, the ranch was showing signs of life. Calves wobbled after their mothers, grass pushed through the mud, and the air smelled like possibility. Sam and Carlos were back to regular hours, and Hannah found herself looking forward to their company. The easy banter, Carlos's stories about his boys, Sam's terrible jokes. One afternoon, while they were all taking a break from fence mending, Sam cleared his throat nervously. "Can I ask you something, Mrs. Dawson?" Hannah still wasn't used to being called that. "Hannah's fine. And yes. The girl I mentioned, Emily Chen, Mrs. Chen's granddaughter, She said yes to walking out with me. Carlos clapped him on the back. Finally! Only took you a year of following her around like a lost puppy. I wasn't... Sam flushed. Anyway, I wanted advice, from a woman's perspective, about how to not mess this up. Hannah hid a smile. I'm not sure I'm the best person to ask. I came here to marry a dead man and ended up with Cole instead. Which worked out, Cole pointed out. Eventually. Hannah turned to Sam. The best advice I can give is be honest. Don't pretend to be someone you're not just to impress her. And listen when she talks. Actually listen, not just wait for your turn to speak. Sam nodded seriously, like she'd handed him sacred wisdom. That night Cole brought it up again. You're good with Sam, patient. He reminds me of my brother, before he married my sister and turned into someone I didn't recognize. Do you miss him? Your family? Hannah considered the question honestly. I miss who they were, or who I thought they were. But the actual people? No. They made it clear I didn't fit in their world. Turns out I fit better in this one, even with the cow kicks and falling off horses. Especially with those. At least here when I fail at something, it's because I'm trying, not because I'm not trying hard enough to be what someone else wants. Cole pulled her closer. For what it's worth, I like what you are. Even when I'm stubborn and argumentative? Especially then. Summer brought new challenges. The creek that fed into Patterson's land started running low, and rumors circulated that he was diverting water illegally. Cole spent long days checking their own water sources, making sure they weren't being shorted. Hannah was alone at the house one afternoon when Patterson himself showed up. She saw him from the kitchen window, riding up bold as brass with two of his men. Her first instinct was fear, then anger. She grabbed the shotgun from its place by the door and went out on the porch. That's far enough, she called out. Patterson reined in his horse, looking amused. Mrs. Dawson, I came to speak with your husband. He's not here. You can leave a message with me. This is ranch business, not really something for a woman to handle. Hannah raised the shotgun slightly. This is my ranch too, so either state your business or get off my property. One of Patterson's men moved like he was going to dismount. Hannah cocked the shotgun. The sound was loud in the quiet afternoon. I said, get off my property. Patterson's amusement faded. You're making a mistake, girl. Your husband's got ideas about fighting me over water rights. That's a fight he'll lose. Maybe, but he won't lose it today, and you won't win it by threatening his wife. They stared at each other across the dusty yard. Finally, Patterson smiled, cold and calculating. Give Dawson a message. Tell him I'm willing to buy his land for a fair price. Better than watching it dry up to nothing. I'll tell him you made an offer and he can tell you to go to hell directly. Patterson's smile widened. You've got spine. Wrong kind for a rancher's wife, but spine nonetheless. He turned his horse. Think about my offer, because next time I come back, I might not be in such a generous mood. They rode away, leaving Hannah standing on the porch with the shotgun in her heart hammering. When Cole came back an hour later with Sam and Carlos, she told them everything. Cole's face went dark. He came here alone? While I was gone? He's testing us, Carlos said, seeing what he can get away with. And he found out Hannah's not someone who scares easy. Sam looked at her with new respect. You really pulled a shotgun on him? Seemed like the thing to do at the time. Cole pulled her aside while Sam and Carlos discussed strategy. Are you all right? I'm angry. Is that the same thing? Close enough. He held her face in his hands. You shouldn't have had to deal with that. I should have been here. You can't be everywhere at once, and I handled it. You did. But Hannah, Patterson doesn't make idle threats. If he says he's coming back in a worse mood, he means it. Then we'll be ready. But being ready didn't make it easier. The threat hung over them like storm clouds, darkening even the good days. Cole started carrying his rifle everywhere, taught Hannah to shoot better than her basic knowledge, made sure someone was always at the ranch. The water situation got worse. Their creek was definitely running lower, and when Cole rode out to investigate, he found evidence of illegal diversion upstream, fresh earth, new channels, all pointing back to Patterson's operation. He came back furious. He's stealing from everyone downstream, not just us, the Hendersons, the Martinez family, everyone. Can you prove it? Hannah asked. I can show where the water's going, but proving Patterson ordered it, that's harder. Then we get the other ranchers together. Make it a group complaint, not just you against him. It took 2 weeks to organize, but Hannah and Cole managed to gather 5 other small ranchers who were being affected. They rode into town together and filed a formal complaint with the territorial marshal. Patterson showed up at the marshal's office before they'd even finished giving their statements. Lies, he said flatly. These people are trying to cover for their own poor water management. The marshal, a tired man named Hendricks, looked between them. I'll need to investigate before making any rulings. How long will that take? Cole asked. Long as it takes. Water disputes are complicated, which meant Patterson had time to cover his tracks or intimidate more people into silence. Hannah saw it in Cole's face, the frustration, the knowledge that the system was rigged against small operators. They rode home in silence. That night, lying in bed, Cole stared at the ceiling. Maybe we should sell, he said quietly. Hannah went cold. What? Patterson's offer. Maybe we should take it, cut our losses, go somewhere else, start over. You don't mean that. I might. He turned to look at her. This land, I love it, but I love you more. And if staying means constantly fighting, constantly looking over our shoulders, maybe it's not worth it. Hannah thought about the ranch, about everything they'd built here, the clean kitchen, the garden she'd planted, the calves she'd helped deliver. But more than that, she thought about what leaving would mean, giving Patterson exactly what he wanted, proving that intimidation worked. We're not selling, she said firmly. Hannah, we're not selling. You told me once that people make choices based on what they can handle. I can handle this. Can you? Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled slightly. There's that stubbornness I love. You're not getting rid of me that easily, Dawson. We made a commitment to this place. We're seeing it through. Even if it gets dangerous? Especially then. Otherwise, what's the point of any of this? They held each other in the darkness, and Hannah felt something settle inside her. This was her home now. Her land, her life, her choice. And she wasn't giving it up without a fight. The marshal's investigation dragged on through July and into August. Meanwhile, strange things started happening around the ranch. Fences cut in the night, a calf that went missing, supplies that arrived at the general store damaged before they could be picked up. Nothing they could prove. Nothing that pointed directly at Patterson. But the message was clear: quit or face consequences. Hannah refused to be intimidated. She kept working, kept building, kept planning for a future that felt increasingly uncertain. She started teaching herself bookkeeping, taking over the ranch's financial records and finding ways to stretch every dollar. One evening, going through the ledgers, she realized something. Cole, what if we diversified? He looked up from repairing a bridle. What do you mean? We're putting everything into cattle, but what if we added something else? Chickens for eggs? Maybe pigs. Things that don't require as much water or land but bring in steady money. Cole considered it. That's not traditional ranching. I'm not a traditional rancher's wife, and you're not a traditional rancher if you're willing to make me a full partner. Fair point. He set down the bridle. What are you thinking? They stayed up late working through the numbers. With careful management, they could add chickens immediately and pigs by spring. It wouldn't make them rich, but it would create buffer income while they fought the water battle. You're brilliant, Cole said, kissing her across the ledger. I'm practical. There's a difference. Is there? Hannah smiled. Not much of one. They started with 24 chickens in September. Hannah built the coop herself with help from Sam, taking pride in each nail hammered straight. The chickens were stupid and noisy and required constant supervision to keep them from killing themselves in creative ways. But they also produced eggs, beautiful brown eggs that Hannah could sell in town for actual money. Mrs. Chen became her first regular customer. These are good, the old woman said, examining an egg like it might contain secrets. I'll take 24 a week, and I'll tell others. Word spread. By October, Hannah was selling 24 eggs a week and taking orders for more. It wasn't much money, but it was hers, earned through work she'd figured out herself. Cole watched her count the week's egg money one evening, a strange expression on his face. What? Hannah asked. Nothing. Just, you're really doing this, building something from nothing. We're building it. No, I mean, yes, we are. But this part, the eggs, the diversification, the books, that's you, your vision. He pulled her into his lap. I couldn't do this without you. You'd still have a ranch. I'd have land and cattle and no idea how to make it actually work. You're turning this into a real operation. Hannah leaned against him, letting herself feel the weight of what they'd accomplished. They'd survived winter, faced down threats, built something that was starting to look like a sustainable life. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't finished, and there were still problems looming on the horizon. But it was theirs. The first anniversary of Hannah's arrival in Silver Ridge came and went without fanfare. She and Cole were too busy with harvest preparations to market. But that night, lying in bed, Cole brought it up. "One year," he said, "since you got off that stagecoach and your whole life fell apart. Fell apart and came back together differently." Better? Hannah thought about Hannah Whitaker from Boston, careful, constrained, living a half-life in her sister's shadow. That woman seemed like a stranger now. "Better," she confirmed. "No regrets?" "I told you I'd try not to have them. I'm keeping that promise." Cole pulled her closer. "What would you tell that woman, the one who got off the stagecoach a year ago?" "I'd tell her that sometimes the worst thing that can happen is actually the best thing in disguise, that losing everything means you get to choose what you build back, and that she's stronger than she knows." "Anything else?" "That falling in love on a failing ranch in the middle of nowhere with a stubborn rancher is the smartest stupid decision she'll ever make." Cole laughed. "Smartest stupid decision. I like that." They fell asleep tangled together, and when Hannah woke before dawn to start another day of impossible work toward an uncertain future, she felt something she'd never expected to feel again. Hope. Hope turned out to be both a gift and a liability. It made Hannah work harder, plan further ahead, believe in futures that weren't guaranteed. But it also made her vulnerable in ways she hadn't been when she'd arrived with nothing to lose. She discovered this on a cold morning in late November when she realized her monthly bleeding hadn't come. Then didn't come the next week either. By the third week, she was sure enough to tell Cole. He was mending fence posts when she found him, his breath visible in the frigid air. She watched him work for a moment, trying to find the words. "I'm pregnant," she said finally. No preamble, no softening it. Cole's hammer slipped and nearly hit his thumb. He set it down carefully, turned to face her. "You're sure?" "As sure as I can be without a doctor." Hannah wrapped her arms around herself. "I know we didn't plan this. I know it complicates everything." Cole crossed the distance between them in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. "Complicates?" "Hannah, this is—" He stopped, his voice thick. "This is everything." She hadn't realized she was scared of his reaction until relief flooded through her. "You're happy about it?" "Happy doesn't cover it." He pulled back to look at her face. "Are you?" Hannah thought about it honestly. Pregnant meant vulnerable. Meant depending on Cole in ways she'd sworn she wouldn't. Meant bringing a child into a world where Patterson's threat still hung over them, and winters could kill and nothing was certain. "I'm terrified," she said. "And yes, I'm happy too." They stood there in the frozen field, holding each other while the wind bit at their exposed skin, and Hannah felt the weight of her choice settling deeper. She wasn't just building a life for herself anymore. She was building one for someone who didn't exist yet, but already mattered more than anything. The pregnancy changed everything and nothing. Hannah still worked, couldn't afford not to, but Cole watched her like she might break. She hated it and loved it in equal measure. "I'm not made of glass," she snapped one afternoon when he tried to stop her from lifting a basket of eggs. "I know, but you're carrying something precious. Let me help." "You help by not treating me like an invalid." They found a middle ground, though it took weeks of arguing. Hannah would ask for help when she needed it if Cole would stop hovering. Neither was great at keeping their end of the bargain, but they tried. The doctor in Silver Ridge confirmed the pregnancy in December. He was a gruff man named Morrison who'd seen everything and was impressed by nothing. "You're healthy enough," he said after examining her. "But you need to understand, out here, childbirth is risky. No hospital, limited supplies, and I might not be able to get to you if weather's bad." "What are my options?" Hannah asked. "Have the baby here and hope for the best. Or go to Denver a month before your due date. Stay there until after the birth." Hannah looked at Cole. Denver meant leaving the ranch for weeks, spending money they didn't have, abandoning everything they'd built at its most vulnerable time. "We'll manage here," she said. Morrison nodded like he'd expected that answer. "Then make sure you have someone who can help. Another woman who's been through it. And pray you don't have complications." On the ride home, Cole was quiet. Finally, he spoke. We could go to Denver. I could take work there, enough to cover expenses. And leave Sam and Carlos to handle the ranch during calving season? Leave our home unprotected while Patterson's still circling? Hannah shook her head. We stay. Even if it's dangerous? Everything's dangerous. At least here we're on our own ground. She meant it. The ranch had become more than property. It was the first place she'd ever felt like she belonged. She wasn't giving that up, not even for safety. Winter came hard that year. The first major storm hit in mid-December, dumping 2 feet of snow in one night and burying the ranch under white silence. Hannah was 4 months along, just starting to show, and the isolation pressed in differently now. She found herself thinking about the women who'd lived in this house before her. Mrs. Harrison, with her 2 small daughters, crying for a week before they left. How many other women had tried to make a life in this unforgiving place? How many had failed? You're brooding, Cole said one evening, finding her at the window. I'm thinking about the women who came before us, who didn't make it. You're not them. How do you know? Cole turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. Because they gave up. You don't. Even when you probably should, you dig in harder. That's not always a good thing. It is when the alternative is running. Hannah leaned against him, feeling the baby move for the first time, a flutter like wings inside her. She gasped. What's wrong? Cole asked, immediately worried. Nothing's wrong. The baby moved. She took his hand and placed it on her stomach, though it was too early for him to feel anything. Our child is in there. Actually real. Cole's expression shifted through wonder and fear, and something deeper she couldn't name. We're really doing this. Too late to back out now. Wouldn't want to even if I could. They stood like that until the lamplight burned low, both of them caught between hope and terror of what they were bringing into the world. January brought news that changed everything. The territorial marshal finally issued his ruling on the water dispute. Patterson was ordered to dismantle his illegal diversions and pay fines to the affected ranchers. It should have been a victory. Instead, it felt like lighting a fuse. Patterson showed up at the ranch 3 days after the ruling, this time with 6 men. Hannah saw them coming and sent Carlos, who'd been working in the barn, to fetch coal from the north pasture. Then she loaded the shotgun and waited on the porch. Mrs. Dawson, Patterson called from horseback. Your husband here? He will be. State your business or leave. My business is between men, not something for a woman in your condition to worry about. Hannah's blood went cold. He knew about the pregnancy, which meant he'd been watching, gathering information, looking for leverage. My condition doesn't affect my aim, she said, raising the shotgun. Patterson smiled, cold and calculating. Put that down before you hurt yourself. I'm not here for trouble. I'm here with a final offer. We're not selling. You haven't heard my terms. Don't need to. The answer's no. Cole arrived then, riding hard with Sam behind him. He dismounted fast, putting himself between Hannah and Patterson's men. You've got 5 seconds to state your business, Patterson. Then you're trespassing. Patterson's smile widened. The marshal's ruling? You think that changes anything? I've got lawyers fighting it. I've got judges who owe me favors. That water's mine and every rancher downstream knows it. The law says different. The law says what I pay it to say. Patterson leaned forward in his saddle. Here's my final offer, Dawson. I'll buy your land for 3 times what it's worth. Enough for you and your wife to start fresh somewhere safe, somewhere better for raising a child. The threat was clear. Hannah felt Cole tense beside her. And if we refuse? Cole asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Then you deal with the consequences. Fences keep getting cut. Cattle keep going missing. Maybe something worse happens. Accidents happen on ranches, especially to women who don't know what they're doing. Hannah saw red. Before Cole could respond, before anyone could stop her, she was down the porch steps with the shotgun leveled at Patterson's chest. Get off our land, she said, her voice shaking with rage. Right now. Before I show you what this woman who doesn't know what she's doing can do with a shotgun. Patterson's men reached for their weapons. Cole and Sam did the same. For a moment, the whole thing balanced on a knife's edge. Then Carlos appeared from the barn with his rifle. I would listen to the lady, senor. She does not make idle threats. Patterson looked between them. 4 people against his 6, but 4 people standing on their own ground with nothing left to lose. Something shifted in his calculation. "You're making a mistake," he said, pulling his horse back. "All of you. This land isn't worth dying for." "That's where you're wrong," Hannah said. "This land is exactly worth dying for, because it's ours. We built it. We bled for it. And we're not giving it up to a bully who thinks money and threats are the same as actual power." Patterson's face went hard. "You'll regret this." "Maybe. But at least we'll regret it on our own terms." They rode away, leaving dust and threats hanging in the air. When they were gone, Hannah's legs gave out. Cole caught her before she fell, holding her while she shook. "That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the stupidest," Sam said. "Both," Carlos said. "Definitely both." That night, they held a war council around the kitchen table. Sam and Carlos agreed to stay at the ranch full-time until the situation with Patterson resolved. They'd take shifts watching, make sure someone was always armed and alert. "This is going to get worse before it gets better," Cole said. "Patterson doesn't make threats he doesn't follow through on." "Then we make sure we're ready," Hannah said. She was calmer now, the adrenaline wearing off into determination. "We document everything, every cut fence, every missing animal, every threat. We build a case so solid that even Patterson's bought judges can't ignore it." "And in the meantime," Sam asked, "in the meantime, we don't give him an inch. We work, we build, we prove that we're not going anywhere." They worked through the night, making plans and preparations. By dawn, Hannah was exhausted but clear about what had to be done. The next weeks were tense. They found cut fences twice, lost 2 calves to what might have been predators or might have been something else. But they documented everything, took photographs, collected evidence. Hannah threw herself into the egg business, expanding to 6 dozen a week. The extra money went into a fund, emergency savings in case they needed lawyers or had to rebuild after sabotage. She kept meticulous records, her handwriting neat and precise in the ledger. Cole caught her working late one night, 6 months pregnant and still poring over numbers by lamplight. "You should rest," he said. "I'll rest when we're secure." "Hannah, don't." She set down her pen. "Don't ask me to stop. This is what I can do. I can't ride fence or move cattle anymore, but I can make sure we're financially prepared for whatever Patterson throws at us." Cole sat down across from her. "I'm scared too, you know." "Of Patterson?" "Of failing you, of bringing our child into a world where we're constantly under threat." Hannah reached across the table for his hand. "You're not failing me. We're in this together, remember? Partners. Even when one partner is pregnant and should be taking it easy." "Especially then." The baby kicked hard, making Hannah wince. Cole's eyes went wide. "Was that?" "Yeah." She guided his hand to where the movement was. "Strong kicks, like someone who's not going to let the world push them around." Cole's face transformed with wonder. "Takes after their mother, then." "We're in so much trouble when this kid gets old enough to argue." "Can't wait." They sat there with his hand on her belly, feeling their child move, and for a moment the threats and fear receded. This was what they were fighting for, not just land or pride, but the right to build a family in a place they'd chosen. February brought the resolution neither of them expected. Patterson made a mistake. He got impatient. Instead of waiting for his legal appeals, instead of continuing the slow war of attrition, he decided to force the issue. He dammed up the creek entirely, cutting off water to everyone downstream. It was too obvious, too blatant, and it affected too many people. The other ranchers, the ones who'd been afraid to stand up to Patterson individually, found courage in numbers. Led by Cole and Hannah, they rode into town together and demanded the marshal take immediate action. This time the marshal couldn't ignore it. The evidence was clear, the violation flagrant. Patterson was arrested on the spot. His lawyers got him released within hours, but the damage was done. The territorial governor got involved. Newspaper reporters from Denver came to document the story. Suddenly, Patterson's small-scale intimidation was a big-scale scandal. The dam came down. Patterson was hit with fines large enough to hurt even his deep pockets. And most importantly, he was barred from purchasing any more land in the region until all disputes were settled. Cole came home with the news and found Hannah in the chicken coop, collecting eggs despite being 7 months pregnant and moving like a ship in full sail. "It's over," he said. "Patterson's done." Hannah straightened slowly, one hand on her aching back. "What do you mean done?" "I mean the governor's office is watching him now. He can't threaten us without it becoming a federal case." We won. Hannah set down her egg basket carefully. We actually won. We actually won. She started laughing, and once she started, she couldn't stop. Relief and disbelief and sheer exhaustion poured out until she was crying too, and Cole was holding her in the middle of the chicken coop while hens pecked around their feet. I can't believe we did it, she said against his chest. You did it. You're the one who kept pushing, kept documenting, kept everyone together. We did it together. They stood there until the chickens got annoyed at being ignored and started making indignant noises. Then they went inside and told Sam and Carlos produced another bottle of mystery whiskey, and they celebrated in the warm kitchen while snow fell outside. That night, lying in bed with Cole's hand on her enormous belly, Hannah let herself believe in the future for the first time in months. What do you think comes next? She asked. Next we have a baby, probably soon, from the size of you. Hannah elbowed him. I meant after that. After that we keep building, the ranch, the business, whatever else we dream up. He kissed her shoulder. What do you want to build? Hannah had been thinking about this for weeks. I want to start a school. A school? For the children around here. There's no school within 20 miles, so most kids don't get any education. I was thinking, we've got the land. We could build a small schoolhouse, bring in a teacher, give these kids a chance. Cole was quiet for a moment. That's ambitious. Is that a no? That's a hell yes. He pulled her closer. You're going to change this whole region, aren't you? One egg and one schoolhouse at a time. The baby came on a stormy night in early April, 3 weeks before her due date, and with complications that had Dr. Morrison looking grim. Hannah labored for 18 hours. Mrs. Chen was there, and Carlos's wife Maria, who'd come despite the weather, and Cole, who refused to leave even when the women tried to shoo him out. This is my wife, he said stubbornly. I'm staying. And he did, holding Hannah's hand while she screamed through contractions, whispering encouragement when she was sure she was dying, being the anchor she needed when everything else was pain and fear. I can't do this, she gasped at one point. Yes, you can, Cole said. You've done everything else. This is just one more impossible thing. I hate you for doing this to me. You can hate me later. Right now, push. The baby, a girl with dark hair and her father's eyes, came into the world screaming her defiance at the universe. Morrison cleaned her up and handed her to Hannah, who looked down at the tiny, angry face and felt her heart crack open in ways she hadn't known were possible. She's perfect, Cole said, his voice thick with tears. She's loud, Hannah said, but she was crying too. And stubborn. Look at that face. She's already mad at the world. Takes after her mother. They named her Sarah, after Hannah's mother who taught her to cook and read, and believed she could be more than what others expected. Sarah Dawson, who came into the world fighting and never stopped. The weeks after Sarah's birth were harder than Hannah expected. The baby didn't sleep, Hannah couldn't figure out nursing, and exhaustion made everything worse. She cried more in those first weeks than she had in the entire previous year. I'm terrible at this, she told Cole at 2 a.m, while Sarah screamed and refused to be comforted. You're learning. There's a difference. Everyone else makes it look easy. Everyone else is lying. He took the baby, walking her around the room in his slow, steady way. We'll figure it out, same as everything else. And they did, slowly. Sarah settled into something resembling a schedule. Hannah's body healed. The world stopped feeling quite so overwhelming. By summer, Hannah was back to work, modified work, with Sarah in a basket nearby, but work nonetheless. The egg business had grown to 8 dozen a week. They were making payments on materials for the schoolhouse. The ranch was stable, profitable, actually thriving. Sam and Emily Chen got married in June, and Hannah watched them take their vows and remembered standing in that hotel room with Cole, making promises she'd had no idea how to keep. They'd figured it out anyway. Carlos's oldest son started working at the ranch part-time, learning the business. He wants to be like Senor Cole, Maria said. Have his own land someday. Tell him to be like himself, Hannah said. That's harder, but better. The schoolhouse was finished in September. It was small, 1 room, basic benches, a wood stove for heat, but it was real. Hannah hired a young teacher from Denver, a woman named Alice, who reminded her of herself a few years ago, eager, slightly scared, determined to prove something. The first day of school, Hannah stood at the door watching 12 children file in. including Carlos's boys and several others from neighboring ranches. Sarah was on her hip, watching everything with serious dark eyes. "You did this," Cola said, coming to stand beside her. "We did this." "No, this was your dream. I just helped build it." Hannah thought about the woman who'd stepped off that stagecoach 2 years ago, lost, desperate, alone. That woman wouldn't recognize the life Hannah had now. A husband who loved her, a daughter who needed her, a ranch that was home, a school that would shape the next generation. "It's strange," she said. "I came here to marry Thomas Mercer, to have a simple, practical life. Instead, I got everything I never knew I wanted." "Any regrets?" "About 100 small ones, but none about the big things." Sarah grabbed a fistful of Hannah's hair and yanked. Hannah winced, gently extracting her daughter's grip. This was life now, beautiful and messy and nothing like she'd planned. 2 years became 3, then 4. The ranch grew. The school expanded to 20 students. Sam and Emily had a baby. Carlos's middle son started talking about buying his own land someday, using money he'd saved working for coal. Patterson tried to cause trouble a few more times, but his power had been broken. Without the fear he'd cultivated, he was just another rancher with land and money, but no real influence. Eventually, he sold his holdings and moved to Denver, chasing easier prey. Hannah started teaching at the school once a week, working with the older students on mathematics and bookkeeping. She discovered she was good at it, patient with the slow learners, challenging for the quick ones. Alice said she should take over entirely, but Hannah liked the balance of ranch work and teaching. She wasn't made for just one thing. Sarah grew like a weed, dark-haired and stubborn and absolutely fearless. At 2, she was trying to follow her father around the ranch. At 3, she was helping feed chickens. At 4, she announced she wanted to be a rancher when she grew up. "Not a rancher's wife?" Hannah asked, amused. "No, a rancher. Like Papa, but better." Cole laughed until he had to sit down. "That's my girl." On the 5-year anniversary of Hannah's arrival in Silver Ridge, they threw a party. Everyone came, Sam and Emily with their baby, Carlos and Maria with all their boys, the families from neighboring ranches, the teacher Alice and half the students, Mrs. Chen, who brought enough food to feed an army. They gathered in the yard between the house and the barn, eating and talking while children ran wild. Hannah stood back and watched, Sarah asleep against her shoulder despite the noise, and felt the weight of what they'd built. Cole found her there. "You're crying." "I'm happy." "Those are happy tears?" "These are grateful tears." She looked at him. "I came here expecting nothing, and I got everything." "You built everything. There's a difference." Hannah thought about that. She'd built it, yes, but not alone. With Cole's partnership, with Sam and Carlos's loyalty, with the community that had slowly formed around the ranch and the school, with Sarah's existence forcing her to be braver and stronger than she'd known she could be. "I was thinking," Cole said carefully, "about expanding the house, adding rooms." "For what?" "For whoever might need them." He touched her stomach, where another child was just starting to grow, too early to show, but real nonetheless. "Seems like we might need more space," Hannah had told him about the pregnancy just that morning. "You move fast, Dawson. Learn from the best." He pulled her closer, careful of Sarah sleeping between them. "I love you. I don't say it enough, but I do. I love you too, even though you got me pregnant again." "Technically, you had something to do with that." Sarah stirred and muttered, "No chickens," in her sleep, making them both laugh quietly. The party went on around them, their family, their community, their life. Hannah thought about the stagecoach that had brought her here, about the death that had freed her, about the choices that had led to this moment. She'd been so afraid back then. Afraid of failure, afraid of being alone, afraid of wanting too much. Now she was afraid of different things, that something would happen to Cole, that she wasn't a good enough mother, that the ranch would fail and they'd lose everything. But the fear was different now. It came from having something worth losing instead of having nothing worth keeping. Mrs. Chen approached with a plate of food. "You should eat. Growing another baby." "How did you—" "I know things." The old woman smiled slightly. "You've done well, Hannah Dawson. Better than I expected when you showed up 2 years ago looking half dead." 5 years ago. Was it? Time moves strange out here. Hannah looked around at everything they'd built. The expanded house, the thriving ranch, the school in the distance, the people gathered in celebration. It does. Any regrets? Mrs. Chen asked. About staying instead of going back to Boston? Hannah thought about her sister who'd sent one more letter asking for money and gotten silence in return. About the life she could have had, safe, small, acceptable. About the woman she'd been versus the woman she'd become. No regrets, she said. This is exactly where I'm supposed to be. Mrs. Chen nodded like she'd expected that answer. Good. The world needs more women who choose their own path instead of following someone else's. She walked away, leaving Hannah with Cole and their sleeping daughter and the party swirling around them. That night, after everyone had gone and Sarah was in bed and the house was quiet, Hannah and Cole sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. The air was cool but not cold, promising another mild autumn. What are you thinking about? Cole asked. Everything? Nothing. How strange life is. Hannah leaned against him. 5 years ago, I was on a stagecoach heading toward what I thought was my future. It turned out to be something completely different and completely better. You think things happen for a reason? Hannah considered the question honestly. No, I think things happen and then we decide what they mean. Thomas Mercer dying, that was just bad luck and bad timing, but I chose to see it as an opportunity instead of a disaster. You chose to offer me help instead of walking away. We kept choosing over and over until we built this. That's a good way to look at it. It's the only way I can look at it without getting angry at the randomness of everything. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the light fade from the sky. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. The chickens were already roosting. Tomorrow would bring work. There was always work. But tonight there was just this. Do you ever miss Boston? Cole asked. I miss some things. Good bread, bookstores, the ocean. Hannah thought about it more. But no, I don't miss the life I had there. I don't miss the person I was. Who were you? Small, afraid, living half a life because I was too scared to reach for a whole one. And now? Hannah thought about teaching at the school, about running the books for the ranch, about facing down Patterson with a shotgun while pregnant, about choosing to have another baby even though the first one had nearly killed her, about building a future on uncertain ground with a man she'd known for 5 years and loved for most of them. Now I'm living a whole life. It's messy and hard, and sometimes I'm still afraid. But it's mine, ours, real. Cole kissed her temple. That's all any of us get, really. The chance to build something real. They went inside as full darkness fell, checking on Sarah, who was sprawled across her bed like she owned the world, then retiring to their own room. Hannah undressed slowly, her body changing again with new life, and caught Cole watching her. What? She asked. Just thinking about how lucky I am. You pulled a shotgun on a stranger who threatened your pregnant wife. You spent 5 years fighting Patterson for water rights. You're about to have 2 children and a ranch that barely breaks even. Hannah smiled. Some people would call that the opposite of lucky. Those people would be wrong. He pulled her into bed, and they lay there in the darkness talking about plans for the expansion, names for the baby, whether Sarah would accept a sibling or try to feed it to the chickens. Small talk, domestic talk, the kind of conversation that only mattered because of who you were having it with. Hannah fell asleep mid-sentence, exhausted and content, and dreamed of stagecoaches and mountains and all the roads that led to here. Years passed in the way they do when life is full, quickly and slowly at the same time. The second baby was a boy they named Henry, easier than Sarah had been in all ways except stubbornness. Sarah took to being an older sister like she took to everything else, with absolute conviction that she knew best. The ranch became profitable, then successful, then the kind of operation people pointed to as proof that small ranchers could make it if they were smart and stubborn enough. The school grew to 35 students and needed a second teacher. Alice stayed on, eventually marrying a rancher's son and settling in for the long haul. Hannah's egg business became a poultry operation that supplied 3 towns. She hired help, taught other women how to do it, created something that gave multiple families steady income. Cole expanded the cattle operation carefully, never overreaching, always building on solid ground. They had fights. One memorable screaming match about whether to invest in new equipment nearly ended with Hannah throwing a plate at Cole's head. They made up, made love, made decisions together, and moved forward. Sam and Emily had 3 more children. Carlos's boys all got their own land eventually, spreading out across the region like roots from a strong tree. The community grew and changed, but the school remained its center, teaching new generations to read and calculate and think for themselves. When Hannah turned 40, she looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Tanned and lean and marked by years of hard work, laugh lines around her eyes, hands permanently roughened by labor. This was her face now, earned through choices and consequences. "You're still beautiful," Cole said from the doorway. "You need spectacles." "I'm serious. You're more beautiful now than when I met you." Hannah thought about that. "I'm definitely more weathered. You're more yourself. That's what beautiful means." On their 10th wedding anniversary, they stood on the porch watching Sarah, now 12 and tall as her mother, teach Henry to ride. The boy fell off 3 times and got back on 4, his face set in determination that was pure Dawson stubbornness. "We did all right," Hannah said. "Better than all right. I still can't believe this is my life sometimes, that I get to have this." Cole pulled her close. "You earned every bit of it." Hannah leaned into him, watching their children and their land and their future unfold in front of them. She thought about the woman who'd stepped off that stagecoach 12 years ago, lost and alone, and convinced her life was over. That woman had been wrong. Her life hadn't